Hello, we are live. Sorry about the delay. We've had a complete nightmare. I'm your host, Ia Wicker, and this is...
Hi, I am your co-host, LL McKinney, or just L. And we have a great host tonight, guest tonight, who E.L. Wicker is going to introduce to us.
We do. We have New York Times best-selling Penelope Ward. I'm so excited. And Wall Street Journal and USA Today. And a massive fan. Hello, Penelope.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited that you're here, actually. I've read every single one of your books, which you know because I shamelessly stalk you. Everybody knows this. So.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk a bit to Penelope tonight about, obviously, all of her books. If you've got any questions, you can hit us up on, use the hashtag WWWWriting, and Penelope will answer your questions for you. So I'm going to start with, actually, I think the first thing we should talk about, really, and excuse me, everyone, but it's Copy Bastard, right?
Yeah, Copy Bastard.
Penelope has joined forces with Vi Keelan, which is another author that actually I didn't know until Penelope mentioned her, and her books are amazing. So how did that come to fruition that you sort of got together and wrote Copy Bastard?
Yeah, well, Vi and I, we speak every day and we chat and we have a lot in common, and I think we have similar writing styles, and we had kind of always toyed around with maybe writing something together, and then I actually sent her a fake cover with that title. And I said, what would you think about this guy and this title? And we both started laughing. But then we thought, you know what? That would be a cool title. And then we started making up the story. We just started building the story. Hey, what if we did a story about this? And what if this happened? We got excited about it, and then we started plotting it. And then we ended up going with a different cover that we liked even better. And basically, we just had a lot of fun. We would take turns writing chapters. I would write one, she would write one. Sometimes she would write two, I would write two. There was really no rhyme or reason, but we would literally just pick up where the other one left off. And so it was kind of like half a writing experience, half a reading experience. So it was a lot of fun.
It sounds like fun. Did you do you each have a POV or do you write both POVs?
We actually did both POVs. So but we didn't do it that way. So we both had to get a feel for each character, and we've been told that from the people that have sampled it and have read it that they could not tell where one picked up and the other one left off.
That's awesome. I'm going to be looking and I'll be like, who wrote this bit? Who wrote this bit? I doubt I'll be able to tell.
You're right.
Well, I did, when I read, I recently read, I think it was Beat or Blur, one of Vi's books, and I did think that her writing style is very similar to yours.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into co-writing a book. You have to have a somewhat similar style, but then you also have to kind of have similar personalities and really be easy to work with too, because you can't be overly sensitive, and you have to basically give up some control, because you have to just accept, well, someone else is writing this with me, and it can't be exactly the way I would have it, but then you end up liking it even more. So
yeah.
it was a lot of fun.
I can't wait to read it. I'm so excited about it. When I got the cover in my inbox the other day, my panties ignited.
We loved it.
I thought I was going to be fast.
We loved it.
You've got quite a few books under your belt now. You've got Stepbrother Dearest, Gemini, Jake Undone, My Skylar, Jake Understood. I know the answer to this. I know the answer to every question I'm going to ask you tonight. But which one holds a special place in your heart? Which one is your favorite?
You know the answer? Oh, okay, you do know the answer. So my favorite is My Skylar. It's just, I love friends to lovers stories. I love stories that span multiple years. So I just think that one was just the one I really worked the hardest on, and the one I'm the most proud of. It's actually one that not as many people have read. But so I think that one definitely holds a special place in my heart. I mean, Stepbrother Dearest was my most popular book. So each one has its own sort of special value. Gemini was my very first book. Jake Undone was really my first successful book, and also the character that I feel like might be my most beloved. Yeah. My Skylar is my favorite book overall, and then Stepbrother Dearest was my most popular book. So sort of they each hold their own sort of value.
That's awesome. With My Skylar, I've read all these books, this. But My Scarlet is the one book that I wanted to throw across the room. You probably know why, because there's that bit in the story where my heart broke, and Skylar's heart broke, and Bitch's heart broke. His name's Mitch. Jake calls him Bitch. Mitch's heart broke, and I didn't see any way to resolve it. How did you sort of sit down and come up with the way, this big problem, and then a way to solve it? Because I couldn't see any way out for them.
I know. I like the challenge of creating a problem that seems insoluble, and then having like the whole second half of the book to basically try and resolve it. But I threw that in there for shock value. I threw that in there because it would, it was a circumstance that allowed them to be separated and allowed me that challenge of rebuilding things. But really, I threw it in there because I wanted to shock people, and I wanted people to throw their Kindles, and I wanted them to be upset. I love that.
It was. It totally was.
Yeah, I love toying with emotions.
I mean, it was upsetting. You upset me. I loved it. With that, with My Skylar, and with Stepbrother Dearest as well, it very much starts off sort of YA, because they're still in high school, but you go through so many stages of their life. You go through them being young, and then you go through them like sort of getting into adulthood, and then just beyond. Like, how do you do that? Because I can't write YA. I've tried. I suck at that.
Yeah, I don't overthink it. It's hard to write multiple age groups because without seeming like you're rushing through the years in between. And I just kind of write it as I see it. I don't know. I don't overthink it too much. I didn't want to spend too much time when they were younger. I don't think any of my readers, really want a YA book per se. No. But I felt in certain stories it's necessary to develop the characters to start them out younger, to kind of see where they started. And I think overall I have a very juvenile sense of humor. So I do like to write younger characters. I've been told in my first book I had the characters in their 30s, but one of the biggest criticisms I received about that book was that they didn't sound like they were in their 30s. So I kind of made sure that my latter books, the characters were a little bit younger, because I think that my own voice tends to be a younger voice in terms of the humor and so forth. But I just did how I see it. Try not to make it seem rushed. So.
Elle, have you got anything that you want to ask? I'm hugging Penelope.
I don't know. I am taking it all in, and I suppose the one thing that I would ask is, like, there are some people who they do just the one POV, and then you have the multiple POVs, and then you went beyond that. You wrote multiple VOPs with someone else helping you write those multiple POVs. How do you do you stay in just one world and write from that person's point of view and then go back and weave the other POV in, or do you write linearly? Like, how do you?
I definitely write linearly. So I write in chronological order. So on the books where I alternate POVs, I just will pick up where I need to. Because that's the way I have to write. I come up with a chronological outline and I stick to it, and I write. I don't stick to it; it does change, but chronologically, I have a very hard time writing out of order because I feel like I need to experience the story as it happens. But so I'll oftentimes write the female and then write the male. The book I have coming out in September is alternating points of view. So one chapter you'll get the guy, one chapter you'll get the girl. But then I also feel it depends on how the story goes, because certain books I feel like it's better to stay in one point of view, because then you get the mystery of wondering what the male character's thinking and so forth. So it really depends on the story. Like with Stepbrother Dearest, I stayed out of his point of view for a long time and brought him in a little bit differently later. But I do think it depends on the story. But I definitely can. I feel like I can flip back and forth pretty easily.
Let's talk more about Sins of Seven. This is Penelope's book that's due out in September. Is that correct?
Yes, the end of September.
Yeah, I can't wait. Sins of Seven. I mean, I know there's not much that I can ask you because I don't want you to give anything away, and certainly you don't want to give anything away.
Right.
But is there anything that you'd like to say about Sins of Seven? I'm not going to ask you directly. You just say what you're comfortable saying.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously been blatantly secretive about that book. And it's really nothing that you haven't seen before. It's just a different type of story in that way. It's not a stepbrother book. I keep calling it forbidden. It's not a stepbrother book. It's not a priest book. But it's a forbidden story. I wouldn't even call it taboo. It's just a forbidden love story. So the characters, for one reason, are not supposed to be together, but yet they have this pull. And it will be alternating point of views. It will span not a long period of time, but it will have it will span several years, and it will be a more serious book. It won't have the same type of humor that you've seen in like Jake Undone or Stepbrother Dearest. Which is kind of nice because it will follow Cocky Bastard in August, which Cocky Bastard is very much a hot summer read, fast-paced, lots of humor. It does have angst, but it's just a little bit funnier. Sins of Seven is more like the kind of book you read by the fire in fall. It's more serious, and that's the way that the story is supposed to be. It's just it has its own personality. So I'm looking forward to people getting to...
I can't wait to read it. But no, you're right to be secretive about it, definitely. Because I don't want to know. I don't want spoilers. I want to find out as I read the book.
I feel like it's more fun for everyone that way. I mean, I feel like, it takes a while to write a book, and sometimes when you release information too soon, people come up with their own conclusions, and I like keeping things under wraps. I think that's sort of, it just, for me, it makes things more fun.
Absolutely. I can't wait to read it. I can't wait. I'm so excited. Just checking feed here for any questions. Suzanne's just tweeting out now that some of the quotes that you said that you like writing younger characters rather than the 30-year-olds with your voice. And actually, I think that one book that's really apparent in it is Jake Undone and Jake Understood, because Jake has got this sense of humour where he's quite adult about things, but his behaviour can be quite young at times as well.
Yep.
How did you build him like that? Like, I'm intrigued by Jake. I love him. He's my book boyfriend.
Yeah, I mean, he has some serious life situations, and that's his way of dealing with it. He was forced to grow up fast, and so he kept a lot of that sort of, youthful personality at bay, and it comes out from time to time. Just none of my characters are based on real people. They're just sort of how I see them, and, with that character, obviously, there was a lot you didn't know for a majority of the book. So, his personality was sort of what kept him sane. He needed to be silly and zany, and, he was just always kind of a kid at heart, but dealing with some very serious situations. So, but it was fun. I enjoy writing.
How did you get into writing? Sorry.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I just turned 40 2 days ago, and, probably around right after 50 Shades came out, I was one of those, typical readers who hadn't read in a while. I was probably watching Real Housewives of New York City and Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and not doing anything really constructive with my time. And then when 50 Shades of Grey came out, I started reading. I would devour any book that was similar. And then one night, I just decided to start writing a book, and I didn't necessarily know what it was going to be called. And I started the story in my head. I didn't even necessarily know where it was going to end up, and that was Gemini. And I guess it started out of boredom, escapism, just like everyone else. I just never utilized it. So it's been a whirlwind in a very short amount of time, in 2.5, 3 years. So I obviously was meant to do this because I found success with it so quickly, and there's a certain amount of luck that comes into it too as well. I think there's something to be said for, written in the stars kind of thing, because, I somehow ended up getting my book into thousands of hands, and I feel like that's sort of almost miraculous, because I started in my dining room, and I still write in my dining room, sometimes with kids around me, and, it's just a miracle to me somehow, how it got from that point to where it is now. I still don't even really understand it. So, haven't been writing that long.
But you've done incredibly well for someone that hasn't been writing for so long, for very long. You've done incredibly well. And I wanted to ask you about that. How, it sounds to me like you don't know how you did so well. Do you have any idea how all of these readers, I mean, you are like a god on Facebook. We all worship you.
Oh. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, it was a little bit easier a couple of years ago. than it is now. I feel like the market has gotten for writers much more saturated. But I mean, when I first put my very first book out, I did offer it for free for 5 days. I was part of, at that time, you know, they call it Kindle Unlimited now, which is Amazon exclusivity. It was called KDP Select then. Now it's much more saturated. Then there weren't as many romance books in Kindle Select. So when I offered it for 5 days for free, only a week after its release, about 30,000 people downloaded it. And
Wow.
it was free. So of those free downloaders, some of the people that, you know, are regulars on some blogs had told some bloggers about it. And one blogger in particular reviewed it, and that's how it really got to be known. It wasn't, you know, certainly by any means a blockbuster book, but many people went out and bought it after that one particular blogger reviewed it. So
Wow.
I think that's what got my name out there a little bit, was having offered the book for free and just getting lucky. I think nowadays, I think a lot of people are trying that, and it's not working like it might have worked for me, just because of the sheer numbers of people putting their books out there. And there's probably some really wonderful books that are never getting read every single day. So that's why I say, to a certain point, luck plays into it. I don't understand how I got so lucky, but I think that nowadays it's definitely harder than it was when I broke through.
Thank you. Have you got any tips for any new writers out there?
Just that the number one rule is always to finish the story. Make sure you're writing the best story you possibly can. Don't even worry about the other stuff until you're done with the story, because that's really the most important thing. Because you don't have anything if you don't have a good book. You can put the best cover on a book, but really to be successful, I think, you know, you have to have that draw, which is a good cover, a little bit of buzz. But if the book isn't any good or the story isn't any good, it's really not going to go very far. So I think you just finish your story first, and then really worry about the other stuff afterwards. But pay attention to what other people are doing, other people that are successful. You know, look at the covers that are in the top 100 and say, okay, well, this is what obviously people are noticing, this type of cover or this type of font. You know, but do all that stuff after you write the book. You know, you definitely interact with your readers. Social media is the reason that, you know, I'm an author. I mean, if it weren't for Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all of these things, I don't know how I would have gotten the word out about anything. Although when I did start, I barely had Facebook followers or anything. But now it's such a big part of my life, and they definitely just need to. It's a full-time job, even though many writers also work. It's a full-time job because there's so many aspects of the process in terms of getting your book out there that it's almost, you can make your head spin if you think about it. But the number one rule is just finish the story, make it the best that you can, and then worry about the rest.
That's excellent advice. Thank you. We've got a question from Tasha. Tasha usually hosts Whiskey, Wine and Writing, but she's looking after her mum at the minute because she's not very well. I hope you're okay, Tasha's mum. Hi. Tasha would like to know, she said, writing so many POVs, do you find editing to be more difficult?
No, I tend to edit as I write. I'm a very, I think a lot of people are able to just write straight through and then they go back and worry about it later. So I kind of go over each sentence over and over in my head first. But it definitely does not impact, writing multiple POVs doesn't impact the editing process for me. I read over my story so many times and go over each sentence even. I tend to write one chapter and then I'll go over that one chapter over and over again until I feel comfortable with that chapter. And then, of course, other people do read it and edit it for grammar and other aspects. But I will go over a chapter over and over until I move on to the next one, which I don't think most people do. Most people will write like a first draft of the book and then worry about it later. I tend to I want to make sure each chapter is finished before I move on to the next, which I don't think is a common procedure.
Yeah, I write like that. It takes much longer to write like that.
It does, but you worry about it less at the end. There's less anxiety because you don't feel like you have to go back over so much because you feel like you've taken special care for each chapter.
I agree. I definitely agree. If you've got any questions for Penelope, you can ask with the hashtag WWWriting and she will answer them for you. If you're looking for us on Twitter, you can follow, well, it's all on Twitter. You can follow us on @WWWriting. And if there's anything you want to know, we'll answer. So I'm just trying to think of
I have a
my.
question.
You have a question, Elle? Go for it.
I do. It's one question that we ask pretty much everybody. When it comes to putting everything together, you said that you do chapter after chapter, and you go back and you go through it, and you write linearly. Are you a pantser or a plotter?
I'm a plotter. Yeah, a plotter. I will. I mean, I just sit there in a notebook before I start the story. I have to know everything that's going to happen in the story. I have to know generally how it's going to begin, where the big twist or dramatic moment in the middle is, and then I have to know how it's going to end. And then I go in the process of writing. I create the dialogue and all of that. But I definitely am a plotter first. I need to know what's going to happen before I even sit down and write that first actual word of the actual story. So plotter all the way.
I'm trying to learn how to plot. I'm not very good at it. I plot and then I try and write what I've written and I go off somewhere else, far, far away. And we've got a question from Jake. Hi, Jake. Thank you for joining us again. Jake's a friend of mine. We talk on Twitter nearly every day. And he has said, do you have to filter your humour or do you have to work hard to create it? Is it natural or practice?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I sit down and I intentionally try to think of things that are funny. So I feel like it is hard to be funny because when you're writing, you don't understand if it's just you, if you're the only person that finds something funny, or if other people will find it funny. So I make an effort to try and be funny, but sometimes you're just really not sure if you are. So I think, and then other times things just come to you. So. But I definitely don't filter anything. I'm not sure if that's what he meant. Like, do I? I just if I find something funny and it makes me laugh, then I'll put it in. I'll trust my own judgment, but I'm never 100% sure if it's actually funny.
That's fair enough. I had a question in my head and it's just left. See, this is why I need Tasha. Why leave me? Why leave me like this? It was about reviews. How do you handle bad reviews? Because you've got loads of amazing reviews, but like any author, there's always somebody that just doesn't like our book.
Yes. I try to stay off Goodreads. Occasionally, I go on and then I'll get upset, or I'll get really happy and then I'll get really upset because I'll read one 5-star and then I'll see a 2-star. I find the 3-star reviews to actually be the hardest because it's usually the 3-star reviews that tend to be the most constructive and in many times hit the chords of your own doubtful thoughts. Like they, will strike a chord and say, you know what, I did think that maybe that was an issue, or I did think that maybe I made a mistake there. I find that the 3-star reviews tend to be very well thought out. I don't love 3-star reviews. Everyone has a different interpretation. Some people say 3 stars not a bad review. For me, I get a 3-star review, I feel bad. I don't know. It's just me. I would prefer to get a 4.5 or a 5. Who wouldn't, right? But I think the 3-star reviews tend to really hit me where it hurts because a lot of times the points that they make are the ones that my own doubts that I had. Whereas oftentimes a 2-star or a 1-star review tend to be people that really maybe shouldn't have been reading your book in the first place, or sometimes they say 2 words and they don't even explain why they 1-starred the book. So the 3-star reviews are actually the ones that get to me the most because they'll say some good stuff and then they'll make some points that might have been things that I went all over in my head or doubts that I had. So, but overall, I try to take them all with a grain of salt because you have so many different opinions and they can't all be right. And in the end, nobody reads the same book, and it just is what it is. When you put something out there, you have to expect that some people aren't going to like it.
Absolutely. When you wrote Gemini, did you know when you wrote it that you were going to have Jake at the end, and from that there was going to be it branches off into Jake, and then Jake meeting Skylar, and then Skylar's book?
I didn't, actually. I never knew that I'd even write another book again after Gemini. I never knew that anyone would read my book. I always said if I knew I was going to write a book based on the character Jake that appeared towards the end of Gemini, that I would have actually named him something else. Because there are lots of Jakes, like Jake Weathers. There are lots of Jakes in books. But what ended up happening was readers of Gemini actually said that they wanted to know more about the character Jake. So I had a storyline in mind, and it was Jake Undone, but it was the Jake Undone storyline, and originally it wasn't supposed to be Jake. So I basically took Jake Undone and I made it the character of Jake. I made the main male character Jake. So I wasn't planning on that, but by the time I wrote Jake Undone, I did write Skylar in there with the intent to write a book on her. So by that time, I kind of knew that maybe that's something I should do, but in the first book I didn't.
Stepbrother Dearest was the first book that I read of yours, and then I found Gemini next, and at that point I hadn't connected that you had all these books. I just thought, oh, this is good. I want another one by this author. And when I read the and reading through Gemini, when I read the end of it, and I found Jake at the end, I instantly wanted to know more about him. So he's this, he's sort of grieving, sort of, meeting his. I don't want to give too much of the plot of Gemini away either.
Right.
He's sort of grieving, and then he just sounds really sexy, and I wanted to know more. I think it's only about 15 at the time.
Yeah.
Makes me really wrong.
Yeah. So I did. Yeah, I definitely was not writing him with the idea of having a spin-off in mind, but I was happy that people were interested, and then I was able to find a way to continue his story.
Jake's asked another question. I don't actually know what he means, but I'll ask it anyway. He said, how about boilerplate literary conventions? Do you ever turn them on their head, surprise conventional readers unconventionally?
I don't know that I have. I mean, I'm not sure if I understand that question either, but I mean, I think the people that read my books tend to be a little bit unconventional. I think the books that I write are angsty, and they're definitely not your boilerplate Harlequin type chick lit, just light romances. So I hope that the people that read them aren't expecting a conventional story. I hope that they're expecting to be taken on a roller coaster ride and surprised a little bit and maybe upset a little bit. I don't ever want to write a story that is predictable or is just sort of happy throughout. There has to be. I feel like my characters always have to earn any happiness that comes to them.
Don't you just? You're mean. You're mean to your characters. One book, and it always sticks in my mind, is Gemini, and it's because from very early on, you're very aware that there's this secret, and you don't know what it is.
Yes.
And it's frustrating.
That goes down for a very long time. I don't know that if I were to write Gemini today that I would have drawn out the suspense so long, but some people really enjoy that, and other people got very impatient. But I felt like, at the time, that was the right timing for the story, and I had to drag it out because that was sort of that's what kept them on their toes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a different kind of story. Gemini is definitely, I look back at Gemini, and it's your first book, so you always look at your first book differently. I think you aren't always necessarily as happy with your first book, but there are some people that swear that that's their absolute favorite, and that always boggles my mind because I feel like I tried so much harder on the others, but maybe what makes Gemini special is that I wasn't trying so hard. I was writing a story as it came to me and not really thinking too much about plotting it out, but just, I was a little bit maybe freer because it was my very first experience.
But I think it totally worked. The fact that he was hiding it and you knew he was hiding it, I think it worked. And as frustrated as I got, I think it just speaks volumes of the author that you can, feel these emotions while you're reading a book. Because I've laughed through some of your books, I've cried through others, and I've just felt pure rage in my style. No.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a credit to you that you can do that. So with Gemini, I think that it was well placed and well drawn out. But yeah, I was frustrated, but I like that I was frustrated.
Yeah.
Jake has just tweeted that everybody loves people called Jake.
Of course.
Elle, have you got anything that you want to ask?
I was wondering, listening to everything, going through everything, is there ever any, as you are writing, or as you were writing, did you ever give any thought to the possibility of, well, perhaps I might take this off into, a series or a sequel, or did you know as you were writing it whether or not it was going to be, that's what it is, and that's where it is, and that's where it's going to stop? How, before you did any books that, that you were going to continue, did you know you were going to continue that story, or did it come after?
With my first book, I absolutely never expected to even write a second book at all, like whether standalone or a continuation of the same story. So now when I write, I mean, as a reader, I tend to like standalones. I tend to like to know that when I finish the book, I'm going to be. But you know, some characters, you know, thinking that there may be a possibility for something later. But overall, I tend to write standalones. Overall, I tend to want to finish the story, and then if something happens to develop midway through, like really, I think it was just Jake Undone that I decided to create a character that I would write a second book with. But the stories themselves are all really standalones because that's what I like to read, and so anyone can pick up any one of my books and not worry about where it falls in the series. They can still read any of the other books and not be totally lost because they're really their own stories.
They are. Ella's just asking a question. Oh,
Okay.
I've lost it though. She's being cheeky now. This is Ella from Escaping Books on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
She wants
Yes.
sneak peeks of Cookie Bastard and Sins of Seven, but I don't think that Penelope's going to give us any. Rightly so.
Well, I think everything you need to know. Well, Sins of Seven, of course, is a mystery. I have not released the blurb to Sins of Seven, and really, look, when you find out the blurb, you're going to say, "Oh, that's what it is." It's nothing that, like I said, it may have been done before. It's just my own spin on it. Cocky Bastard, what you need to know is in the blurb. Basically, that's the gist of it. It's a fun road trip story with, you know, the same elements of angst that I typically throw in, and it also has the humor that my readers tend to love. So I think, I mean, it definitely. I'm very happy with Cocky Bastard. I feel like that it's really reflective of my personality, and it's really the type of story that I really enjoy writing. So that one in particular, I think is going to make people laugh, and then I'm hoping that Sins of Seven makes people cringe.
Ooh, we like to cringe. I just want to talk about Jake Understood
Yes.
because it's a 2.5. And generally, I didn't, and I've said this on Facebook in the reader group, and I think in your group, that I didn't like 2.5s until I read Jake Understood.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I think that you managed to put a fresh spin on it. Like there was a whole different, not just the perspective, but the story going through it. You really felt everything that he had he'd been subjected to, really, because I mean the boy had it tough. How did you feel about writing and releasing the 2.5?
So Jake Understood is actually, that was the hardest book I've ever written. It was the result of my making a promise to my readers and then really thinking about it after the fact and saying, you know what, this is probably not the best business decision. To this day, it's my least selling book. It's one of the ones that I think some people love the most. But I really think that when you write an alternate point of view, people assume that they're going to be reading the same story. And there are elements that are the same, but I tried to make it as different as I possibly could. And I was really proud with the end result because I did give them a lot of the present time stuff, and then I felt like I gave them new stuff even in the past, that I wanted to give them a truly different experience. I wanted them to see everything from his eyes, the way it played out, and fill in some of the holes from the original story. So I really wrote that story for all the people that loved Jake Undone and asked me that told me that they wanted more Jake. But I promised the story so long ago, and then by the time I finally got to starting it after Stepbrother Dearest and all of that, stepbrother craze, it was really hard for me to sit down and return to Jake. Once I got started, it went well, and I was able to fall back into that world. But overall, I probably would not write another 2.5 alternate POV. I mean, it was a full-length novel, so I changed the title from 2.5 on Goodreads to just Jake number 2, because it's truly a second book. It's not a novella. 2.5 gave me the impression that maybe it was smaller, but it was the same size. So I don't think I would write another alternate POV book again, but I'm glad that I did, because that particular character I think is probably still my most beloved character overall, and I think that I think I did him justice, and I put him to bed well.
Yes. Well, I think you did a really good job, and I'd probably, if you wrote another Jake book tomorrow, I would buy it today.
Yeah, there'll never be another Jake book, but I'm glad that I gave him sort of that final hurrah, because I feel like that character, there was a lot more to be told. That story is very complex, and that ending of the first book was a little bit bittersweet. Things weren't tied up and wrapped up in a little bow. There were still some issues there that needed to be resolved.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I resolved them as well as I could.
You definitely did. You did resolve them. But there's some, because I just want to say to people that it's not all in the past. There's a lot of fresh themes in Jake Understood. And one of the things that I loved more than anything else was all of the characters across all of the books coming together. I thought that was lovely.
Jake Understood was not only the alternate point of view of Jake Undone, but it was sort of the goodbye song to the whole Gemini series. So anybody that's read all my other books, aside from Stepbrother Dearest, which is completely separate, hopefully appreciated that, because it tied everything together.
Okay, Stepbrother Dearest. Now, ask me today, then ask me tomorrow. Today I might say my favourite book is Stepbrother Dearest. Tomorrow I might say it's Jake Undone. It varies because I love them both so much. Yeah. But what made you write a Stepbrother book?
Well, I can assure you that it was not to start a Stepbrother craze. It was not my intent. I just thought that, I had read a couple of books. That had stepbrother themes that I enjoyed, and I felt like there weren't that many of them. And I thought, how cool would it be to use the word stepbrother in the title, because then people knew exactly what they were getting. So I just kind of came up with this title that I thought was cool, Stepbrother Dearest, and the story was a result of my procrastinating in writing Jake Understood. I wasn't ready to start Jake Understood. I knew that story was going to be tougher for me. So last summer, I literally sat down and I started typing the first few words of Stepbrother Dearest, and it just never stopped. And that was the fastest book I've ever written, and it was my most successful. And it's because I was having fun. I hadn't told anybody about it. Nobody knew I was even writing it. And then I just surprised people with it. And, of course, apparently we didn't know at the time that there was this huge need for stepbrother stories, because hundreds of them emerged after that. I don't know how I feel about that. The whole thing is crazy, but Stepbrother Dearest by far was just a fun summer escape for me, and it worked out well.
There have been a lot of books after Stepbrother Dearest. Now, believe me, I've read most of them, but and some of them are really good. But a lot of them, you can almost see that they were written because it was popular. And they were put out, and me and Ella talk about this quite a lot, because we both love stepbrother books. And when we find, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, when I wrote that book, I never said there should never be another stepbrother book. I just feel like the speed at which they came out sort of sickened a lot of people to them, because I hear now, oh, not another stepbrother book, and it's just kind of like, oh no, like what happened? But I mean, I like stepbrother stories because obviously I wrote one,
Yeah. I love them, and I keep saying that I'd love to write one, but I don't think that I can. I don't think I can write that tension that needs to be there. And actually, when I'm reading all of these books that come out, because I've literally read nearly all of them, that's what's lacking in the ones that don't hit the spot. That is what's lacking, the tension, that existed between Greta and Alec. You wrote that so beautifully, and people are failing to write that. Now, there have been some really good ones. There are some excellent stepbrother books out there, but there are some pretty dire ones as well. And I'm still looking for another one as good as Stepbrother Dearest. I want more. Everyone, write me stepbrother books. I'll read them all.
I think I'm done with stepbrother, sadly.
Jake just wants to know, what kinds of PR and marketing do you do now? I know you talked earlier about KGP Select and how you when you first started it wasn't as popular then as it is now. What do you do now, apart, because obviously you have Facebook, where we all jumped on Cookie Bastard like this. So how do you go about that, your PR now?
So I don't really, aside from the social networking and giveaways that you run on Facebook to help perhaps promote a new teaser or a new cover, there's not a whole lot that I do in terms of PR. It really is centered all around Facebook. Posting things in groups and posting, making sure that your posts that are important are being viewed by paying for advertising or running giveaways. Like, that's pretty much how I get the word out about anything. Facebook is not what it used to be. They do limit reach a lot more than they did a long time ago. So you have to find ways of getting the word out. It's not easy. You may have 14,000 followers on your page, but then only 500 will see your post. So it's definitely not easy to get the word out about anything. And there are promotions that authors can do, like book club promotions that they have to apply for and so forth, but I don't really do anything other than social media.
She's got it all in the bag. Ella, is there anything that you'd like to ask?
I've been thinking really good questions, and then you'll ask one that answers the question that I was thinking, and so it's like now I have to come up with a new one.
Should I ask one in the meantime? But then I'm going to ask the one that you want to ask.
Probably. You said that it was, I think Stepbrother Dearest, you said it's the one that, no, not, was it Stepbrother Dearest? The one that you said that you wrote was the fastest one that you've ever written?
I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm having trouble hearing you. I lost the video. I can hear little bits and pieces, but I lost the images. Oh, wait, now you're back. Okay, now you're back.
Yay.
You said that it was the fastest book that you had written. How quickly did you write it, and do you think that writing speed has any effect on, how you feel overall about how a book, how it's coming out, and do you take a longer time? You feel if you took longer that you're more confident about putting it out there? Like, how does writing speed and work, how does that affect, your state of mind while you do that?
Sometimes the books that I write faster are actually the books where the ideas are flowing better. So it took me 2 months to write, and I do feel like the ideas flow easily with that one. So I don't think that writing speed has anything to do with it, because sometimes if you're struggling with a story, it's going to take you longer. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a better story. So if you really love the story, oftentimes you will write it faster. So.
Do you find that writing dual POV helps to write faster?
No. I feel like I'm writing Sins of Seven a little slower, and it's actually because I think I'm just overthinking everything. I think every time you write a story that you worry about how people will interpret certain things or certain decisions that your characters make, it tends to slow me down. So it has nothing to do with alternate POVs. I've written, Stepbrother Dearest was a single POV for the majority of the book, but I feel like it's more about the story itself. Yeah. I tend to overthink more than I used to, because you've read more reviews and you start to think about things people have said, and that's really not good, because it does tamper with, maybe your original ideas for something, and you should just write the story that you feel anyway.
Yeah. Do you have critique partners and beta readers that go over things with you?
I actually don't have beta readers, because I feel like sometimes when you are in the stages of developing a story and you give that work to people to read, people are going to have different opinions, and I feel like I don't.
Oh, I think we've lost. Oh, she's back. No, she's not. I think we've lost Penelope.
Are you there?
Yeah, we're here. She's back.
I'm saying frozen right now.
You've just come back. You dropped out there for a moment.
I don't know if you can see me. I'm no longer.
We can see you. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm hearing you now, but I'm not seeing you anymore.
We can still see you and we can hear you, so you're doing all right. Oh, I said that she was doing all right, and then I broke
little bits and pieces of you.
Google Hangouts is not being our friend tonight. It's been really naughty.
Now you're back a little bit.
I'm sorry. I keep talking over people, but it's because I can't hear because it keeps dropping out for me as well. Ella, is it dropping out for you?
Yes, it is. But now I think everybody's back now.
Oh,
I think.
Yay. Awesome.
Little bits and pieces.
What is the hardest part for you to write? Do you have a single thing that
Now
you
I see you again.
to write? Is it working?
I
I
think
was just
partially.
asking, what is the most? Do you find anything more difficult than other things when you're writing? Ooh, I think we've lost her. Oh, we can't.
Okay, I can hear
Can
and see both of you.
you
Can
hear
you
me?
both hear PJ?
Okay. Let me know if you want me to do something.
No, you're back now. It's fine. It's just Google
I'm
being
no
a
longer
pain.
hearing anything.
Oh, you can't hear us. Okay, give it a moment and we'll see if it comes back.
It decided it didn't. It's gonna go out the same way that it came in.
It has, hasn't it? We started the
Yes.
show not being able to hear anybody, and we're ending it pretty much the same way.
Oh, and
Oh, Penelope is gone.
it completely dropped her now. Okay. Now she's
I'll
back,
oh, she's back again. Excellent.
I think.
Hopefully,
Okay.
it won't take long to load. In the meantime, if you want to follow Penelope on Twitter, we weren't able to get her tag working up, but it's at Penelope Author.
Oh, am I back?
You're
Yes.
back.
Okay. I just it shut me out, and now I guess I'm back.
You are back, thank God. We've only got a few minutes until the end of the show, but I just wanted to ask: is there anything about the writing process that you find more difficult than anything else?
Just sometimes you get to points in the middle of the story where you start to overthink everything and doubt the story, and I do get into patches where I might have to stop writing for a couple of weeks and just maybe read or just watch television or something just to get my mind through that rough patch or the doubts that I'm having about the story, and then those are the parts that are just toughest. Aside from finding time to write, that obviously is a problem as well, but I do have points in the writing process where I start to stall a little bit and just have doubts about the story when I start to overthink it. Most of the time, overthinking things based on what I feel people might feel about the story, and I worry about, if they won't like it, if a certain character makes a certain decision that might make them immoral or something like that. So I tend to overthink. That's the toughest part for me.
Okay, thank you ever so much for answering our questions. I really appreciate it, and I've loved having you here. You've been great, thank you.
Thank you.
So if you want to follow Penelope on Twitter, it's at Penelope Author. You can visit her website at www.penelopewardauthor.com. Ella, is there anything that you want to say?
Yeah.
That I really enjoyed listening to everything that you told us about your process and what it is that you put into each story, and it's always amazing to hear what it is that goes into what you're giving people. So thank you so much for joining us and answering all of our questions and so forth and so on.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you ever so much. So that is it from us for tonight. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.